everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you join us from. Welcome to the Officially Green series. I'm truly delighted to have you with us today for another conversation that invites us to think differently, to feel deeply, and to explore ideas that shape our lives and our world. I am your host, Adenike Akinsemolu, and our guest today is someone whose work has been transformative in the way we understand life itself. Joining us is Dr. Andreas Weber, a biologist, philosopher, and nature writer whose voice bridges science, art, and spirituality. Dr. Weber studied marine biology and cultural studies at Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany, and worked with the renowned theoretical biologist Francisco Varela in Paris. His work challenges us to see living beings not as mechanical parts of a system, but as subjects, poetic beings who create meaning through relationship and reciprocity. Through books like Enlivement, towards a poetics for the Anthropocene and sharing life, the ecopolitics of reciprocity, Dr. Weber invites us to imagine the biosphere not as a machine to be optimized, but as an ecosystem for sharing, for vulnerability, and for transformation. And today, we turn to something that touches each of us very personally: love. Love is more than affection, as we know. It is vulnerability, it is openness, the willingness to give, to share, and sometimes to let go. It brings immense joy, but it can also carry pain. Very strong one at that. So here's the question at the heart of today's conversation: can true love exist without suffering and sacrifice? It is indeed a profound question, one that connects the personal to the universal, and I can't think of a better guide to help us explore it than Dr. Weaver. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Andreas Weber to the Officially Green series. Dr. Weber, it is such an honor to have you with us here today.
Your honor is totally on my side. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for choosing this so necessary and bold topic, and in such an outspoken way. I really felt a relief about going there directly. It's so needed.
Thank you very much for joining us and also for accepting our invitation. The session is going to go as a Q&A session where we have conversations, and after that, we'll open up for questions from the audience. Please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box, and also we will be taking some live questions after the session. So, Dr. Weaver, back to you. Your work has shaped how we think about life and our connections. And so let's begin at the very heart of it all, like I mentioned, love. When we use the phrase true love, it can also mean so many things to different people. So first, how do you define true love in a way that goes beyond romantic ideals?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks so much. Yes. You know, there was a best-selling book in Germany. It's probably has become a best-selling book in other languages too. I didn't follow it that closely, and that book on its title had love, an untidy emotion.
Wow.
And yes, and that is just not what love is. So it became a bestseller by starting with the wrong idea and then expanding on this wrong idea. And you know, it is so important for the Earth's for humanity, let's say, to think again about what love is, because the dominant technological civilization, let me call it like this, has gotten that really wrong. Although everything is somehow revolving about this wrongness or about this lack or this strangeness. And at the same time, love is, I would say, the only reality. So it's very important to get our bearings about the only reality. And I will try to very quickly answer your question. So I'm not talking too long. I would define love as acting in the interest of somebody else's aliveness. And I take this, I didn't invent this definition, I take it from the humanist psychologist Erich Fromm. So he was first. So love is acting in the interest of somebody's aliveness, or you could also say love is acting in the interest of life. And we have to go from that. And that is where it starts, and that is where we somehow need to look at, and then we can relate all other experience with which somehow have to do with love to this. So that's how I would start. So true love is acting in the interest of somebody's aliveness. Thanks for offering me the occasion to just drop in this definition, because it's very rare, you know.
Yeah.
People say, "Well, love, you don't know." I like this guy who wrote this bestseller. Okay, done with that question. I hope you can
Yeah.
make
Yeah,
sense.
I like that definition. And linked to that, why do you think people so often connect love with suffering? For instance, across culture and faiths, we see this connection. In Christianity, love is tied to sacrifice of Christ. In Buddhism,
Yes,
compassion works hand in hand with suffering. And in Hinduism,
yes,
the bhakti is about surrender. So why is this theme so universal across religions, across cultures?
yes. Okay, yes, yeah. Thanks for that. And I mean, that's what I like so much about the invitation, that you directly went into this suffering thing, because of course, there's so much suffering, and suffering is such a reality. And at this moment, I mean, we know how many people are incredibly suffering, but the whole living earth is suffering too, and we're just in a terrible phase of suffering. I would even say of dying. So they actually, I'm like I try to be somehow concise, but I don't know if I will manage. So there are three things. I think one thing is very important, that there is a source of suffering which is related to our superficial nature as individuals who are depending on the multitude of life. That's a challenge, but that's how this works. So that is one suffering. So this is the suffering we need to deal with anyway. And well, I'll say something to the word suffering too. And then there is different cultures' way to cope with this fundamental challenge, that we are somehow individuals, but we are also one. And this way of coping with this, let's say, primary challenge can introduce secondary challenges, which would be suffering created on top of a situation which is, I wouldn't say suffering, I would say it is a challenge. You know, it is a challenge to be at the same time an individual and somehow also all of life. And this, I mean, all the old cultures somehow try to balance this out. And many of them somehow try to balance this out in terms of making the goal to go beyond our individuality and somehow to rest on the side of where we are alive, where we are more than just our individual selves. And there is this side. But this has been somehow become highly unfashionable with, I would say, with the basics of the dominant technological civilization, or AKA capitalism, where there came the idea that, you know, we can who is successful or rich enough can get rid of all suffering. And and that's of course an illusion, because there's this fundamental challenge of existing as an individual, but also existing as somehow whole reality. And you know, love, just to bind this back to love, to romantic love. Romantic love in this thinking has very much become a field in which we are totally relieved of personal suffering. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who grew up in the Western culture, in German culture, European culture, and so I speak mainly for this, of course. But that has been very much become the dominant culture, and there you go and search for romantic love in order to be saved, in order to find somebody who will somehow alleviate all the challenging, on the one hand, the challenging situation of being single and mortal, and at the same time knowing that we are something else. And of course, also the challenging situation of being brought up with less than ideal loving care from the parents. So, romantic love has become this potion to cure all. And that's why everybody is just crazy on the lookout or whatever, searching and checking and of course, this does not work, as we all know. So this does not work. This is not it's not a remedy for getting the whole thing wrong. Okay, I'm trying to be short, but it's, of course, this is such a complex thing. I mean, maybe it's not even complex, but to unfold it is because it's so ingrained in our doing. To unfold it is stirs some deep stuff. All right, I give it over to you so you can deepen it with a follow-up question.
Yeah. So I think
I'm also getting hot here talking about love and sufferings.
Yeah. All right. So I think you've kind of answered this, but I think one of the things I was going to ask, do you believe that suffering or sacrifice is essential to true love? Or
Yeah.
can love exist purely in joy? I mean, you talked about romantic love. It's kind of a way to escape from suffering. So can love exist purely in joy without giving something up? Do you have to give up something for you
Yeah.
to love something or
Yeah.
someone?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm speaking also from my personal experience, which
Okay.
is rather limited, of course, as everybody's personal experience.
Yeah.
So and this is the moment when I say it might be, or if you asked me if you were an editor and you asked me to write a short essay about this, I would probably start with somehow looking at the word suffering, because I would not immediately say that discomfort or challenge, I used challenging before, is actually immediately suffering. I think suffering is something which comes from somehow a situation which goes against the grain of someone which really goes into the wrong direction, which somehow goes against life. So I would say, and I'm going to try to explain this again. I would say that let's see how I would say that love is, and I might talk about this a little bit more also, as love is somehow the essence of what is here. There is some inevitable realness or truth about it, and we can never circumvent it. And so what is the essence of what is here? So what is here is the miraculous process that life is given into being. This reality is a reality which gives life into being. And you see, from my perspective, this is actually an act of love, giving life into being. That's basically following my definition from your first question. And giving life into being means creating individuality. So the gift of life of individuality, which is, otherwise it would just remain on that side of the desire of the, when I say the ultimate reality is gifting life into being, you could of course say when I talk about this, I'm in divine terrain. and the European mystic Meister Eckhart even had, that was his definition for God, was the entity that cannot but give, or give life. So we see this, the whole reality is a life full of life, which has been gifted into being, and life is individuality. And this individuality, and this is just the foundational paradox of us being here, this individuality clashes with the source in a way, because it's a reduced way, it's individuality. It's not total. It's not the total gift. So we have a fundamental problem, which is the fun of life and also the challenge of life. And which also, which in a way is not foundational. It is superficial, as this individuality is just, it's a gift from a source, but the source is whole. And as a gift from the source, it is also the source. So, we, in touching love, in tapping into love, we always somehow relate back to this source. And this is what is so great about it. This is just this, everybody here, I think, probably, I imagine, it's rare to not do this. Everyone here knows love, has fallen in love, or is loving right now, or is loving their kids, their children, or their beloved animals, or their tree in front of their dwelling. It's so, you all know this feeling, and you all know that there's something fundamentally sweet and special, and at the same time incredibly familiar and home-like about this feeling. So we go into this terrain where we touch the source, and when we fall in love, we get this divine ecstasy of falling in love. We see smiles on everybody's faces, and this other person is just sparkling with all beauty that they can be, until the moment when it goes away. and we somehow scratch our head and say, hey, you provided me with this divine experience. Why did you stop? and that's just the breaking point between what we really are, but what we are not born into, namely part of the source of reality, and we're born into this individuality. So we have to somehow translate. This was a very long introduction, but it's still an attempt to answer your question. We have to translate the source of reality, which we are, into our individual actions. So that means that at the point where the magic of the encounter, in which I actually see the face of God in somebody else's face, when this starts to fade, what do I need to do then? Knowing that love is about being interested in the aliveness of the other. Then I have to switch into the mode of providing the conditions to somebody else who allow them to be alive. And you could say that's getting into a giving mode. After being given a huge gift, getting myself into the action mode of giving. And that's where we all fail, or where we mostly fail. So you see, the giving mode, of course, means that I have to set priorities. I mean, I'm not encouraging codependent satisfaction of somebody else's totality of wishes, of course. I'm just talking about creating reciprocity in the interest of the aliveness of the other. But of course, that means that we'll collide with some of your own personal, individual passions. That will collide. And that's the natural suffering of healthy relationships. But I wouldn't call it suffering. For some reason, I wouldn't call it suffering, because, and I would say that's my experience, because if you see that you give up something a little bit, or maybe even a big bit, and this truly makes a mutuality based on the desire to provide life to one another work, this gives you such an incredibly beautiful gratitude, because then you receive love back from the source at this moment. So, you know, then it's not even suffering, or it is suffering with in a sweet pain, you know. So this is why I hesitate to say suffering. But of course, it can be, it must be, it's necessarily tough. And I mean, parents know that more, you know, the better example for this sort of attitude is parental love, if it goes well. I mean, not all parents love well, as we know, because of this, because the joy of contributing to somebody's life there is so palpable. So I would say actually that's the scale. I hope I somehow was able to somehow explain this. It's easy, but it's also complex.
Yeah. I mean, you've given such a beautiful picture of love as a gift from the source and the shift from receiving the gift to entry the giving mode in our relationships. But as you
Yeah.
say, that's often where we fail. So could you share some ways, whether in partnerships, whether in family or even community life, that we can actually practice this kind of giving without losing ourselves? How do we make reciprocity real in everyday love
Yeah.
without losing ourselves?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's the crucial question. That's the proof of the whole thing. Yes. Okay. I will try. Just let me again stress in your wonderful summing up of what I said, that the the the, the, the crucial step is to actively switch from being the recipient of love to become the source of love. You know, you receive this huge gush of love, but then you need to become the source of love yourself. That is the switch. I see you, Adenike, I see you somehow frozen. I hope the connection is still working. Oh yeah, now you're moving in. You were a bit frozen, so I was afraid that the connection was somehow broken down. Okay, so that's this shift is very important, because you know, because
Yeah.
then, because if we are, when we are acting with the goal of love, in the name of love, then we become the source again, you know, and that is the great feeling. That is the great feeling, and that is a great feeling. Okay, so but now you asked a much more concrete question, and I think the most important, I think there are two things are important. One thing is actually we can know what to do, and there's a practical problem. It's not the problem of knowledge, one. And the second one is that the danger in what I'm advocating is, of course, that it can be mistaken as some sort of recipe to always serve somebody else's needs, be they as terrible as they could be. And of course, that's not what I mean. So I'm not, and I really know what I'm talking about here. I'm not suggesting to become to let yourself trample upon, or to take, you know, to take narcissistic lashing out or whatever, because what you're doing is to serve life, you know, and you can see if you serve life, you know, you do not serve the ego of the other person, you know, you serve the life of the other person. You know, you serve the ability to love of the other person. So these are two very important things. And so you see, I'm still looking at the source. I'm still looking at how can we allow the source to flow through our actions. And I think with this we are relatively safe. I mean, at least in terms of how to do that. We're relatively safe not to fall in the trap of just becoming somebody's slave. Of course, that's not what this is about at all. So it is about are you do you get me, or because you kind of have little freezes in between, but am I can you do you are you hearing me? So
Yeah.
okay, so because
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to
Yes.
okay, so I will just continue even when you freeze a little bit.
Yeah. I
Just
can.
continue. Very good. Um, so that's very important. So it is it is at the same time it is about your own aliveness and the aliveness of the other. You know that it doesn't it's not it's not serving the source, the life-giving source, if you silence your own aliveness and become the instrument of somebody else. So, and that's also important. It's also important to see that actually there's a very close connection between love and truth. And because, truth is about what enables us to live, or what gives us life. I mean, and that again, then to put this into action, then this is about loving. So, the hard part is to be fully truthful with yourself. That's the hard part. That's the hard part of that. And when you're fully truthful with yourself, then you will know what to do. And the second hard part is then to follow up. And the wonderful thing is that we have an organ to know the truth, or to know the truth in love, and that's our heart. It's very simple. And these old traditions, and also many indigenous traditions, they hold the heart in such a high regard, because the heart is the place where we know love. So the heart is a physical organ. It's actually the physical organ which gives life to us with every beat. It's very interesting. And it's also a spiritual organ, which tells us when there is love. And it is also, and that's very interesting, it's a bit mystical, it's also an organ with which we can even create love. The heart is an active organ with which we can create love. So we have the heart, and the heart tells us the truth about love. And at least theoretically, because then, of course, it's important to see that what my wonderful colleague and big star for me, Bell Hooks, the writer Bell Hooks, said. She said, many people are wounded where they would know love. So that's a problem. The problem is that traumatic damage, as a young person, but also later, will somehow create a minefield or a wreckage where your sensitivity is to know love. And actually, it means that our ability to know love can never be destroyed, because it's not an ability which is from this world. This is an ability from the source which we carry inside of us. But what can be, of course, damaged is our ability to go there without fear. And the consequence is that, and I've seen this, and I always find this incredibly tragic, is that people who find love, who find their hearts, shy back, because this reminds them of when they had love and they were punished for it. And that is something very challenging to work with. I mean, if you have this, or even if you want to somehow help somebody to open their heart, and they do this, and it is, I mean, it's an understandable trauma reaction of the human soul, and it's difficult to work with, because somebody who's suffering from this has forgotten that they are an active source of love, and that the true peace comes from feeling that they are an active source of love. So, but they have, if they have somehow, like, if you're traumatically fixated on this being like the most terrible thing that can happen to you, it's very difficult to learn to go there. And I mean, so you see, and that is suffering, and that is tremendous suffering. But this is suffering which is induced by other humans, basically, by how societies function. This is this sort of secondary suffering which puts so much terror on top of the challenge, which life is anyway, the beautiful challenge. And it would not need to be like this. And I'm sure that there are cultures, or there have been cultures, in which this was much smaller. You know, there were cultures. The cultures are possible which are much less traumatic than ours, but ours is terribly, terribly, terribly traumatic, as you know,
Mm.
as you know. And it's difficult to get out of this. And yeah, okay, so I stop here because I'm monopolizing this. You have some other beautiful questions. I'm stopping here.
No,
I
it's
might
fine.
go.
Actually, as you were speaking, I was reminded of something very physical and very human, which is childbirth. You know, for a mother, giving birth is one of the deepest form of suffering. And yet, you know, what emerges is not diminished love, but perhaps the purest, most undiluted love we know. So it feels like a living example of what you're describing. That's in the acts of giving, even through pain, something profoundly life affirming is created. And listening to you
Mm,
connect love with truth and the heart,
mm,
I'm also thinking about those who struggle to open to love because of past wounds, like you mentioned. You talk about traumas. And though for people listening, let me just ask for people who carry those kind of traumas, how
yeah,
can they begin to heal so that the
yeah,
heart can trust love again? What
yeah.
happened? What helps people that have gone through trauma, whether through past relationships, whether through you know, unreciprocated love, how can they open up again without fear? How can they learn to trust again? Uh
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that is such an important question because, as you know, we just have to glance at the news and we see how trauma is like millionfold multiplied in every minute. You know, it is so terrible because trauma is not something, just some bad thing and then you sleep over it and it's gone again. It's just like it ingrains itself and creates more trauma. Yeah, so that is so valuable. And okay, so let me try. You can heal trauma when you remember that the source of love is within yourself.
Mm.
But how do you remember this when this is just what you have the biggest difficulty to to understand? So how can you do this? You can do this when, okay, that's it, because it's a bit mystical. I can vouch for it with my experience on various levels. I will try to explain. You can you can you can you can learn this again. You can learn to feel that source inside of you again when somebody gives love to you. So that's something which can be done. And gives love to you means that there is, from this somebody, there is an interest which is only in your aliveness and not in
Yeah.
anything personal to get back. And yeah, I mean, it's mysteriously, it is possible to give love, um, but it has somehow been forgotten. But you know, humans are not very good at it.
No.
There are very, very few humans who can do this. Humans are actually not very good at it. They are not very good at it from the beginning, but they somehow created schools or systems or traditions in which some could actually get good at this. But now it's not very reliable, and most psychotherapists are very bad at this because they
Mm.
terribly need something which they somehow try to get unconsciously from others. But you know who is very good at this is actually other than human beings. So while I say this, I'm watching, looking out of the window, and there's an old, what is the name? Well, I don't have the English. I will put it afterwards. Those trees which line the southern European squares. I will come with the English language name. So it's old. It's big. It's like 3 stories high, and I'm continuous looking at it actually while I talk to you. When I'm not looking into the camera, as you have realized, I'm kind of looking above across. So you know, humans often feel held when they are in the company of other than human beings. You know, people also say in nature, but that's, for me, that's sort of like too much of an abstraction. And because they feel loved and they are loved, because they you know, every tree is giving you your life in every moment where you breathe in. You're just breathing in the body of the tree, which becomes your body. So, you know, there's a whole sort of practical, mystical ecology behind this, which is very easy, actually. We all learn it in school and then we unlearn it again. And this has not only a chemical side, it has also a side of desiring life to be, you know. Every organism who is not damaged at their traumatically damaged at their heart desires life to be in general, you know. That's something life has. Life is the desire that life should be, and so we can get it there. And this is why all these nature experiences and natural therapy, and so this is, they're so efficient. And this is also why the destruction of all this is so terrible, because that's again, you know, that's the most anti-traumatic reality we have is taken away. So that's incredibly terrible, you know. All these, you know, we all know it. The species decline, insect decline, deforestation, all these terrible things, oil drilling in the, you know it. You have just, we all have it just in front of our doorstep. And you know, so these beings are teachers of love. So that's my take on why it is actually great to be with them, or to sit with them, or to, you know, to your dog or your cat or your whatever, fish. um, and yeah, so there is hope, but it is actually, it is really a real challenge. You know, there's no way around and you know, that's when I'm just looking at the news, and everybody is always looking at the news, and I'm just like, how can this incredible mountain range of trauma, you know, how can this fade away? And that's suffering, you know. But this is not suffering, this is not built into how living reality works. This is somehow because humans have at some point decided to know it better, you know, to know better how reality works, and to take everything for myself, and then be better than the others, and then, you know, and then somehow fight death. Fight death with this. And because we've forgotten, or we've forgotten that, well, first it's futile, and then actually, as we're part of the source, there doesn't need to be fear of death. So you see, there's a, let me just say this, there's this flip. This flip is that every terrible suffering on the plane of individuation, like in this real embodied space and time world we're in, and we're having this call in, is not the ultimate truth about our reality. It is in some way it is superficial, but that doesn't mean that it is not terrible on the plane of individuality, and that it should not be there. It should not be there. This should not be there. But I mean, you know, when I say death is, that's not the last word, because the important thing about us is that we are the source, you know, and the source cannot die. And the source is just the inner experience of love, which we all know is incredibly blissful, you know. So that is the basic foundational source. But we have to walk towards it in this life, and humanity is doing it. Well, let's not say humanity, because it's not linked to being human. It's linked to being part of a certain culture. So let's say the dominant technological civilization is doing it terribly wrong. No, it's doing it terribly wrong. You could also say the only problem is the lack of love. We live in a culture that you know, which is about dropping love, you know, become the toughest, become better, become a winner, make a deal.
Competition.
Yes, it's not only, and competition means war, you know. Competition means I have to be first, and every means, you know, means means legitimizes, the goal legitimizes means it's terrible. It is a culture of lovelessness. And we're also afraid of death. So it's, we're in total delusion. We are in total delusion. And then we find somebody we fall in love with, and we think this person can solve all these problems. And this doesn't work, of course.
Something we can't even give ourselves alone.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm just gonna read some interesting things from here. Some of the audience said, I think let me just look at some. Abubakar Tukor said that the sacrifices, resistance, and tolerance are truly definition of love. Someone said, everyone and everything is capable of both giving and receiving love directly and also indirectly, even without knowing they're doing that. Someone said love is a color that spreads through the heart and paints life with brightness and joy. Love is always true and beautiful. Emmanuel did say that for me, love is simple, just be there when you're needed. Another person, Gabriel, said love is about sacrifice, treating someone with care and letting them know they matter. And Aisha said, to me, love is like peace, the kind of peace that comes when the bird returns home and feels peace in their nest. And another person, Prince Rutherford, said, what happens when you can't just be there for everyone? And then Deborah did say that love is sacrificial and love is not always fair and peace all the time, but love is a responsibility. And I think one of the things that I'm reminded of is the quote by the famous poet Rumi. It says that the wound is the place where the light enters you. And I think it is a striking reminder that even in our deepest pain, there can be an opening towards healing and connection. And you mentioned that we can begin to heal when someone gives us love purely for our likeness with no agenda. And
Yes.
I find it striking that you also said humans are not very good at this. So I'm just going to show this to the audience that for those of us listening in our ordinary lives, whether it's friendship, whether it's parenting or community, how can we begin to practice this kind of love without expecting anything back? Because that's like the truest um, form of love. But I'm going to move away and transition into today's world. We live in a time where equality, self-care and personal boundaries shape how people think about relationships, unlike, before. And how does that change the meaning of love especially in the modern relationships that is built on equality? How can
Yeah.
how can we now how does that change the meaning of love?
Yeah. That's another question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's, I mean, actually, the love, how I talk about it can only be based on equality. It can only be based on everybody being on an equal footing. And I would even say equality with all beings, not only among humans or among um, different identifications of gender, however we talk about that. But, as having the source in our hearts, everybody is representing the source. So we are all totally equal. So that is one thing. So it can only work as this, because otherwise there will be some some aspect of law and order which in control but terrible for the others. So that's
Mm,
actually, I think it is easily to answer. Um, because you can if you um, oh, let's put it in a different, let's bring in something else. Let's say if you're in a relationship,
mm-hmm.
you have a shared interest, and the shared interest is to nourish love. That's your shared interest. You actually don't have, each one has the private interest of getting most out of it. But you have a shared interest of nourishing love. So you have something which is actually above your personal things. And you have a shared interest. And then you get something from this love, and you have to give something from this love. And this, I mean, this can be sort of like distributed. Maybe one is doing more of that, and the other one is doing more of this. But the idea is that you're in a sort of commons. The word is commons. You're in something to which you contribute, and you get back you get a gift back from it. And there's no power. There can't be any asymmetry of power. That's very important. That's very important. And as we know, we already talked about modern relationships. It's problematic. So I mean, that's, I would actually, these are complex things, and I might have talked about them in a complex way, but I think it boils down to something very easy. Ask yourself, am I acting in the interest of the aliveness of the other, or am I acting in the interest of aliveness as such? Do I do this? And if both parts, or how many parts are involved in this, seriously do this, even they might slip, they might fail, and they might be an error, but if they seriously do this, I think then it can go very well if they seriously do this. So it's a very easy recipe. And let me just say one thing about sacrifice, because you read something about somebody said love is about sacrifice, and I strongly disagree. That to me sounds very much like a cultural thing. Love is about sacrifice. Love is about giving life. It might mean, if you're true to that goal of giving life, it might mean that you have to sacrifice something, or that you have to undergo whatever suffering, that you will be challenged, that you have to let go of something, that you have to let die something. But that is secondary. It's very important to see this, because otherwise you can be totally infatuated with sacrifice, and that doesn't sound healthy for me. It doesn't sound healthy for me. That sacrifice is secondary. Life is primary. Love is about life, about giving life. The crazy thing is that this whole reality is about giving life. And as we are just a part of the whole reality, we are also about giving life. It is so incredibly simple. Only if we stop being about giving life, then it becomes problematic, Then it becomes problematic. All right.
I think that's profound. I like how you said that it's just about, giving life. When you really think about it, I mean, we don't tend to we think about it from a superficial point of view, and that is probably why maybe we think about it as sacrifice, that we have to sacrifice, especially in romantic
Yes.
relationships. Yeah.
Yes.
But
yes.
when it comes to friendship and family relationship, is sacrifice the same as romantic relationship, for instance? Like many traditions from the Confucian filial piety to the Christian teachings on family devotion, do you think it looks different in terms of sacrifice?
Yeah, I mean, it looks different because in those relationships we are actually somehow a little bit more prone to go against things we actually don't really like to. And that is because we have somehow learned that romantic love is the only remedy against all the terrible things on earth. That's somehow in our head. So the romantic partner is there to give us the security that we have lost when we started to believe that after death we are really dead. when we stop believing that we are eternal beings and we will never vanish, when we threw that away, then we needed something which was the substitute, and that was the romantic lover. So we are totally overburdening this, and we're not overburdening other affectionate relationships so much. But I mean, we also, many parents also overburden their relationship to their offspring in a different way. That's a total other subject. When children who are so incredibly able to love are abused by parents who are actually not able to love, and they take the love from the children and they don't give anything back, that's another trauma generator. But still, romantic relationships are I think are the most problematic ones, because they have become this substitute they have become the substitute for the divine. We fall in love for the first time with whatever 12 or 14, and we get this rush of ecstasy, and we come into touch with something which then the whole pop culture tells us is somehow linked to the beautiful face of a real other person, and this real other person has to provide all this, and this is just not doable because it's wrong, you know.
Yeah, very unrealistic. And lastly, before we take questions from the audience, thinking beyond the personal, can love for humanity, for community, or for the planet exist without sacrifice? For example, fasting, service, or stewardship of creation are seen as acts of love in faith traditions. So, do you see
Mm.
parallels with sustainability and civic responsibility?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you know, talking about the planet, um, there are many people, and there are much more of them around me here in Paris than around you you're in Lagos, right? Right now.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Mm-hmm.
you're frozen again, unfortunately.
Yes, yes, I
Um,
can hear you. I
so
can hear
yeah, so you know,
you.
be very much better off if they did a little sacrifice, you know.
Mm,
So maybe I would actually admit this word here more. Um, but again, you know, it is about truth. So we know the truth, what humans needed to do in order to remain in a life-giving biosphere. You know, we all know the truth. It is very easy. I mean, we all know it. We all have heard it like 5 billion times. And so, you know, first comes the truth, and then we have to see what needs to be done. And actually, sacrifices need to be done. And let's let them be done by those who have the most stuff to sacrifice and who
mm,
could share a little bit, but actually they are the least ones who sacrifice anything. Instead, they want a terrible world regime of warlords, which is on the horizon. So, you know, that's actually, you know, that's well, that's if when I said before that what our culture is, the sign of our culture is that it is totally lacking of love, then, you know, going back to love in our culture would mean that the the, the participants of this culture would act in the name of the interest for aliveness. So that would need to be the prime goal of this culture. That's what I wrote my book Enlivenment about, to say that actually cultures, the goal of culture is actually the human contribution to ecological aliveness. That's what a culture is. You know, that's the human formulation of being, of loving back, of loving back, of loving
mm,
back. And of course, on the plane of action and of managing this, it means a lot of sacrifice for many people, and it yeah, I mean, that's also, you know, it's terrible to see that nobody even thinks of, I mean, many people do, but nobody of those who would have this big impact thinks of sharing anymore. But, you know, sacrifices will then happen, and then they will start with the weakest, and we see all this already. So it's a terrible terrain of lovelessness.
yeah. So, Dr. Weber, thank you for guiding us through these questions, and you've helped us see love not just as an emotion, but as something relational, as something spiritual, and even ecological. So now I'm gonna open the floor to our audience to take just one or two questions because we've really run past the schedule. So I have one of is it Prince Rutherford? If you would like to. All right. I think we have another question from Chuang. Chuang, if you have a question, please
Yeah,
press.
I have a question. I think I will not turn my camera on because it's dark where I am now.
That's fine. Go ahead with your
Yeah.
question.
Um, I've learned a lot from Andre's presentation and the fact that he said the love is about sacrifices, and it's made me reflect on a lot of things, and I do really appreciate that. And I just have a question for Andre about love being all about sacrifices. Um you know, in this contemporary society, like you offer a lot to help someone out, and in first place they show you love, and to some point that you will be excited and you will be passionate about really getting into their shoe and trying to solve problem with them, just to be betrayed later on. So how do you draw a line between that scenario of not falling into um that trap later on? How do you examine that the kind of love you are giving is worth it?
Mm. Yeah, thanks. Are you talking about falling in this trap in terms of a personal relationship or in terms of something else? I wasn't totally sure.
I mean, it sounds like in terms of relationship, but especially where I am, I'm from South Sudan, the youngest nation in the world, and which is also termed to be the most corrupt country in the world as of now. So,
Yeah,
the standing of the country
yeah,
is so bad, and it's more of betrayals, like some high profile politicians of like putting a lot so that they can secure the safety of the other people,
yes.
but signing some agreements they later on fall into a trap. So how do you adjust those things? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. I'm really truly grateful that I can talk to you about these things. So, Adenike, again, it's great. We should have more of these conversations together, because that's really, it's really, I'm really not inside the Eurocentric bubble here anymore. And that's I would learn much more from you guys than you learn from me, actually. So this yeah, so Chuang, thank you for that. So first, just a little clarification. I did not say that love is all about sacrifice. I actually said the contrary. I said sacrifice might come secondary, but love is about truth, and love is about the truth of giving life, and it is about the truth of receiving life. So what you described is this sort of totally ego-centered environment in which everybody wants just to be the winner. And that's not a terrain for love. So if you try to go towards these people and situations with the pureness of giving life to them, then you will become a martyr. You will become a saint who dies for that. It might be a way to react to this, but of course, it's dangerous terrain. It's dangerous terrain. And then we are at this point. How can we somehow melt the hearts of those people who completely shut down on their reality of being the source? How can we do this? And this is just I would see this just as a terrible symptom of the capitalistic mindset through the heritage of colonization. It's just that so many people are just about their personal advantage, and then they're so far removed from love, and they're in trauma terrain. And yeah, still you ask me what can we do? So um, being true and in contact with your own heart, and being sincere and not lying, and knowing what is real, I would say these are things that can be done. And you see, in the end, what comes out of all these fragments I'm somehow collecting here is courage, being courageously tied to what your heart tells you. And courage, by the way, comes from the Latin word for heart, corps, or the French word for it, cœur, le cœur, courage. So courage is heartfulness. And it's a challenge, really, really, really. I really hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there's a question in the chat from Linda. She said, what about love language? Do you love someone the way you want to be loved, or the way they want to? And how do you even control that?
Okay, great question. Yeah. Hey, that shows me how how many aspects this has. And I have to admit, I didn't completely understand. Maybe can you just read it again? Love language?
Yeah, so she's talking about love language. Said, what about love language? Do you love someone the way you want to be loved,
Oh
or
yeah.
the way they want to be loved?
Oh yes, of course, of course. Yeah, I mean, yes. So love language means to learn the language of the other, and it also means to have the other learn your own language, you know. So do a constant translation of your languages into one another. I mean, that's the poetic beauty of love. And of course, you see sometimes it doesn't work, you know, if you don't learn the language. And then it's about truth again, and to say, let's call it a day, you know, we're not speaking the same language. But you know, I can sense that also in this question, there's somehow you're asking who should be the leader, you know, who should be the one who calls the shots. And I really, let me tell you again, you will only be satisfied, you will only feel at home in this relationship when you are in a reciprocal situation, when you know when both sides truly want the aliveness of the other. You know, just imagine this for a little moment, you know, somebody truly wanting your aliveness. I mean, failing and slipping, that is normal, but you know, foundationally being agreeing on wanting your aliveness, doesn't that feel wonderful? You know, having someone who wants your aliveness, doesn't that feel like, you know? And if you don't have someone who wants your aliveness, you will be unhappy. And if you
Yeah.
don't want the aliveness of the other one, you will also be unhappy. You know, you might act it out on others, but you will still be unhappy. You know, like all these immature babies with their rockets and drones, they're all unhappy. You know, they're all unhappy. So you can only be happy when you are in a life-giving environment and you're willing to give life to. Then you're happy. But then then you're happy. And you don't need anything more. This is all you need.
Yeah, thank you. I think this kind of answers the question of Deborah that says that what can be done despite all the love you give, you only get a trade in return, especially when the person does not show any love at all.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think that kind of answers the question on
Yes. Yes.
reciprocity.
Walk away from such a person. Walk away,
Yeah,
really.
walk away. And I think someone also talked about Oluwaran from Emmanuel also talked about for love languages. He said that communications and attention to detail is important. So some people are able to communicate what matters to them or how they want to be loved, and that way you know what their love language is. And then Linda says, "Thank you so much. That was your comment was very insightful." Just trying to go through. Maybe we can have just one more question. I'm not sure if I understand this question. It's from Al Mamun. It says that Mr. Andreas, does love mean having ethics too?
Of course. Of course. Ethics, right? That was the word.
Yeah, yeah,
Of
yeah.
course, yeah. I mean, I started with ethics, and the ethics is that you're there to give life. You know, that's the ethics. You can check all your actions. You can check, and you know, the great thing is this is so easy. This is so easy. Is this a life-giving action? And you always factor yourself in. So you know when this is an action which is extremely life-giving to somebody else, but which kills you or which injures you, then you know, then it's not a life-giving action, you know. So it's actually love is much more ethics than it is a feeling. And the interesting thing is from following its ethics, we come into a state of being.
Hmm.
State of
Yeah.
mind, wrote somebody in the chat, but it's a state of being in which we feel at home, you know. Love is the sort of point where all lights of flight end, where we are at the same time in a state of being and we are following an ethics and we are active, you know, and we're many things at the same time. So love has many dimensions, but one thing it is not without law. It is not without law in the sense that I can determine what love is, because love is that thing which I cannot determine at all, because it is much bigger than me, because it is where I come from, you know. So I can only help it passing on its gift. And that's the ethics, you know, pass on the gift. Pass on the gift, but don't let yourself lured into thinking that you need to sacrifice yourself. That's totally wrong. That's wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you have been
I,
given life to be alive, so be alive.
yeah. Yeah. Angela Obel said, well, kind of resonate with what she said. She said, I believe love also means having boundaries. That makes so
Of
make sure
course,
you're not depleting yourself for the sake of others.
of course. You know, with this little sentence, you know,
Mm,
with this is why I love this definition so much, which I gave you right at the beginning.
mm,
Love is acting with the interest of the aliveness of the other. You know, you take this sentence and you bring it to everyone with whom you are in a relationship, and you know, you just check it. It's like a scale, you know, it's like a scale. It's like a 10 centimeter scale, and you just measure it, you know, it's very easy. And then you have to be brave, because eventually you will see this person and this person, you know, um, they don't. And then you have to be brave, because can you face that, you know, somebody who you don't want to you want to keep the illusion of that he or she or they are loving you. And with this little definition, you just prove if it is true or not. You know, you can also go take your own love, you know, look at your own love. Are you actually interested in the aliveness of so and so, or are you just craving their presence, you know? This definition is
mm.
love. But you know, if you go to with this definition to this tree, I still haven't the name of it in my head. If you go with this definition to this tree, then the tree does fit the definition, because it is constantly acting in the interest of my aliveness. And this is just the crazy thing, you know. That's the crazy thing. So I recommend to take this, you know, forget everything about sacrifice and, you know, social norms and everything what people demand of you, and you just go with this simple definition about how human behavior can fit to what the source desires, and then
Mm.
act accordingly. Then you have to be very courageous. I mean, Chong has just given us the little example of how we need to be incredibly courageous. So allow yourself to be a little bit less than incredibly courageous, but the challenge is to be courageous. The challenge is to be courageous, to have
Thank
heart.
you. Yeah, to be courageous. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Weaver, for guiding us so deeply today. You began by challenging the modern myth that love should erase suffering, and instead, you name love as the act of life given itself. And the gift of, you also talked about the gift of individuality, and that should be held within a larger wholeness. From there, you invited us to make the essential switch from receiving love ecstasy to becoming a source of love in our actions. So we should be the source of love. And you also drew a vital distinction between serving life and serving the ego. And you showed how truth and love meet in the heart. So the organ that knows and even creates love. You spoke about we spoke with compassion. We spoke with compassion about trauma and how it teaches us to fear love, and how healing begins when when someone offers an agenda-free care for our aliveness, a practice we can also learn from the living world around us. You reminded us today that in equal relationship, love functions like a commons we both contribute to and receive from, and that sacrifice shouldn't be primary; it is secondary, and the aim of it all is to give life, the giving life. Love is about giving life. And for this clarity, for this courage, for this tenderness in this topic, Dr. Weaver, thank you. We would like to say thank you so much. A lot of our participants are saying thank you for the insight. We're indeed grateful for your presence today and for the invitation to love more truthfully, not just to love for the sake of it, to love more truthfully. So thank you so much. And we hope that in the future, when we call on you, you will accept that invitation to further more discussions on, just life generally and
Yes.
how it, yeah. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Well, I really have to thank you to bring me here. Really, really. And I also have to thank you for this amazing summary of all what I said. That's just incredible. I could never have done it. So thank you for that. And really, really thanks for bringing me there. And you know, it is when I saw as I said, the line, the title, I knew that it would be so good to talk about this and to talk with all you, dear listeners, dear spectators, about this. So I really do hope to have a follow-up, and I feel very, very humbled and grateful and honored to be here. Thank you. And thanks to all the beings who are with us here. I look again to the tree, and with all the beings who hold us and who will love us, you know, with every breath. So thanks to them to be with us here.
Thank you, Dr. Andreas. The recording will be made available, and we'll send in the coming weeks. We're going to send the link to the recording. It will be available on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you so much for your time again, Dr. Weber, and to everyone listening. I hope that you have a good day, evening, afternoon, wherever you're joining us from every part of the world. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.